Hi, welcome to a very special edition of Days in Our Lives, where we are going to look at some children's books. And while this one is geared to kids, I think it's important for adults to also watch and share a love of history with your kids. Yes, history is the story of us. It is living, it is breathing. Sometimes it's hilarious, sometimes it's sad, sometimes it makes you angry, and sometimes history is just stranger than fiction. But I think it's really good to cultivate that love and show that history is interesting. And in this edition of Days in Our Lives, we will be exploring some prominent figures in Black history. February is Black History Month, and we have 4 books that we will be exploring in this edition. But before I do that, I want to spotlight the building behind me, which is the National Museum of African American History and Culture. This structure just opened in September 2016, so it's one of our nation's newest museums. And if Washington, D.C., where it is based, is not kind of in your travel books right now, I always recommend visiting a museum's website. You will find so many great things there, including online exhibits or even like learning resources for parents and teachers. As you can see here with the scroll through the website. So even if you're not going to DC, if you're looking for resources to learn about Black History Month with your children, visit this website. But to start off, we are going to go with Little Leaders, Bold Women in Black History. This picture book is by and illustrated by Vashti Hairston. And with this one, you just get a host of different women, including poets like Phyllis Wheatley, civil rights activists like Rosa Parks, singers like Ella Fitzgerald or Nina Simone, media personalities like Oprah Winfrey, aviation pioneers like Bessie Coleman, and you get such beautiful, cute illustrations done by the author and a little write-up. And within our intro, I had images of Josephine Baker, who is covered within this book. And Josephine Baker, I just find her so fascinating as like a person. She was born in the US, then she moved to France. She was a dancer, she was a singer, but then during World War II, she became a member of the French Resistance, sneaking out secrets using her sheet music and undergarments. And recently in 2021, she made the news again as her body was moved to the Pantheon, which is the pretty much one of the highest honors that France will give you. And she was given that honor for her work in the French Resistance, and also she was a part of the March on Washington with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Also featured in the intro was Bessie Coleman. She was a early pilot in the 20s. She had actually heard stories about female pilots flying in France from brothers who were a part of the American Expeditionary Force during World War I. So she went to France herself and learned how to fly. She came back to the US and she would do stunt piloting. And unfortunately, she was killed when her plane had a mechanical failure. And of course, also featured in the intro clip was Harriet Tubman. And to pair with this one with Harriet Tubman, this one is for older children and is a chapter book with more details about Harriet Tubman. Harriet Tubman is famously known as an Underground Railroad conductor, and her code name was Moses. and she was said to have never lost a passenger. But she had a very, very interesting life beyond like the Underground Railroad. She actually worked for the Union Army. She was a spy, and she also was an armed scout. So she was probably one of the United States' first women military leaders because of her work as a scout. But even though this one is a picture book, I still think it is great for older children too, as it covers so many different Black women who have done such fascinating things and do not get the notice that they deserve. But it makes like a very great starting point for like research papers and just looking for different people to profile. And from here, in the Harriet Tubman book, we're going to go to one of our new picture books. And Nichelle Nichols also makes an appearance here. But this one is To Boldly Go, How Nichelle Nichols in Star Trek Helped Advance Civil Rights. And Nichelle Nichols is very dear to my heart. My family was really big into Star Trek. And so we just adored her character, Lieutenant Uhura. And we just really, any Star Trek TV, any Star Trek movies, we would watch them. But Nichelle Nichols, she had a very interesting life. And she was such a talented actress. And she did a lot for like advancing women in space. But this book really shows how she worked with Gene Roddenberry to create her character and make Uhura kind of who she was. And she also played a pivotal role in the civil rights movement. And I am so grateful that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. loved Star Trek, because at one time she was considering leaving the show. And she had a conversation with Dr. King, and he's like, no, you cannot leave. You need to understand how important your role is for the movement. Because for once, Black Americans were able to see a Black woman in a place of leadership where she was treated respectfully. And you have to remember at this time, fire hoses were being turned on people, and Star Trek offered a hopeful look at humanity's future. But definitely check this one out. This is by Angela Dalton and illustrated by Lauren Simner, and I hope I pronounced her last name right. But it is just beautifully, beautifully illustrated. And here is her meeting Dr. King. But I just adore this one. I can see this one going out a lot, so definitely get on the whole list. And then also in our intro, I had a group shot of the Tuskegee Airmen. And the Tuskegee Airmen were a all-Black fighter unit in World War II. And they came from the Tuskegee Institute, which was started by Booker T. Washington, another interesting Black leader, and I would recommend finding a book on him. And a part of the Institute's training was Willa Brown, who was also, like Bessie Coleman, an early Black woman in aviation, and she was helped by Cornelius Coffey. They were both instructors there. But this book gives you like a very good look at who were the Tuskegee Airmen, kind of how they got started, where they went during World War II. And they had a very strong record, and I have figures over here that kind of outline their achievements during World War II, which I was able to find on Wikipedia. But if I was like a bomber pilot, I would want these guys escorting me. But these are just 4 of our picture books or chapter books that we have in the children's department, putting a spotlight on Black history. And Megan actually has a display available right now, right when you enter the children's department from the Main Street entrance. And I highly recommend just browsing through and finding some of these interesting people, because there are so many great stories that just need to be explored and learned. And I want to also kind of step back. If your children are very interested in aviation history, I would recommend a much closer trip than Washington, D.C. to the Air Zoo, which is just across the border in Michigan, near Kalamazoo, Michigan. I went in, I think, probably junior high with my family, and it was a very memorable experience, and you can interact and see some of like the old World War II airplanes. And right now they have a special display or exhibit that is particularly for Black History Month, and it's called Black Wings, American Dreams of Flights. And this exhibit was created by the Smithsonian. And at one time they did have an exhibit showing belongings to Claire Chandler, who was a Tuskegee Airman from the state of Michigan. But there are so many great resources. Make use of them. Check out our display. Maybe visit the Air Museum. Definitely visit museums, different websites, and find resources. Maybe do a digital tour of an exhibit. Until next time, goodbye.